Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Space Channel. On a clear night, the sky looks crowded almost past believing, with thousands of stars to the eye and hundreds of billions more behind them. And yet, that crowded sky is utterly silent, with no signal and no greeting from anyone at all. That silence is the unsettling thing we follow tonight, and the surprising truth is that it is not really a sign of an empty universe. It is the sound of a cosmos built in 4 quiet ways to hold its civilizations apart. Tonight we trace each of those 4, slowly, all the way to a kind of peace. If you find these quiet journeys worth your time, a like or a subscribe helps the channel reach others who do. Thank you for being here. But for the next 2 hours, none of this is a distance you need to cross. There is nothing here you have to reach tonight. Settle in and let the question grow soft. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breathing slow. Let the day drift quietly away. Let's begin. On any clear night, far from the glow of a city, the sky looks crowded, almost past believing. Thousands of stars stand out to the unaided eye, and behind them runs the pale band of our own galaxy, holding hundreds of billions more. Beyond all of those, unseen, lie hundreds of billions of other galaxies, each one its own ocean of suns. It is one of the largest numbers the mind can try to carry. And it leads almost everyone who looks up to the same quiet thought. Surely, somewhere in all of that light, someone else is looking up as well. That thought is older than telescopes, older even than writing. For as long as people have had a clear night and a moment to wonder, they have filled the sky with others. It feels almost unnatural that so many suns could burn for so long with no one gathered around them. And so the mind reaches outward, half expecting an answer, half expecting that the universe is as full of company as it is full of light. And yet there is something sobering in what happens when we turn toward that crowded sky and truly listen. We hear nothing. There is no signal, no greeting, no clear sign that anyone at all is there. The sky is full and the sky is silent, and those 2 facts sit strangely beside one another. For a universe so enormous and so old, the quiet can feel almost like a held breath. It is one of the most curious silences in all of science. The question tonight grows out of that strangeness, and it is worth stating with care. People often ask whether we are alone, and that is a fine question, but it is not quite the one we follow tonight. Tonight we ask something a little different, and in its own way, gentler. Even if the universe is full of other civilizations, why does meeting any of them seem so close to impossible? Existence and contact are not the same thing. A cosmos can be brimming with life and still be arranged so that no 2 neighbors ever stand together. That distinction matters more than it first appears. It is possible for the night sky to hold 1,000 living worlds, or 1,000,000, and for every one of them to remain forever out of reach. The silence overhead would be exactly the same in a crowded universe as in an empty one. So the silence by itself cannot tell us whether anyone is there. What it can tell us is something about the shape of the universe and about how that shape holds its inhabitants apart. This is the quiet truth we will follow all the way down tonight. The universe does not seem to need to hide anyone in order to keep them from us. It only needs to be what it already is. It needs only to be enormous and bound by a single speed and immensely old and slowly growing. Those 4 ordinary features, taken together, are enough to keep almost any 2 civilizations from ever touching. And by the end of the night, that fact will feel less like a loss than like a kind of rest. It helps to lay out the 4 separations gently before we walk through them one at a time. The first is the separation of distance, the simple and enormous emptiness that lies between one star and the next. The second is the separation of speed, the firm limit that nothing, not even light, may cross faster than a single fixed pace. The third is the separation of time, the long age of the universe, against which any civilization is only a brief flicker. And the fourth is the separation of expansion, the slow widening of space itself, which carries the far things ever farther away. Each of these alone would make a meeting difficult. Each one, on its own, would stretch the gap between neighbors into something hard to cross. But they do not act alone. They act together, layered one upon another, and each one quietly strengthens the rest. Distance makes neighbors far. The speed limit makes the far things slow to reach. Time makes the slow ones miss one another altogether. And expansion makes the missing permanent. There is no villain anywhere in this story, and that is part of its calm. No one built a wall around us. No one keeps watch to make sure we stay apart. The separation is not a decision at all. It is simply what falls out of a universe large enough, old enough, and orderly enough to have made thinking creatures in the first place. The very features that keep us from our neighbors are the features that allowed us to be here to miss them. So we will take the 4 separations slowly, in turn, the way you might consider 4 sides of a single quiet shape. We will look at how far the stars truly are, and how firm the speed limit really is, and how long the universe has been turning, and how steadily it keeps growing. And then, having seen all 4 together, we will ask the older question once more. We will ask where everyone is, and we will find that the silence answers more gently than we feared. Before we go on, it is worth setting down one feeling and carrying it through the whole night. The point of all that follows is not to prove that we are alone. It is almost the opposite. The universe may well be alive in 1,000 places. The barriers we will trace do not empty the cosmos. They only keep its many lights from gathering, the way a wide and quiet country can be full of distant houses whose lamps never meet. To understand the silence is not to grow lonelier. It is to understand the size of the home we have been born into. For now, it is enough to settle into the scale of the thing. The sky overhead is not a ceiling. It is an opening onto something so large that our ordinary sense of distance simply runs out part way and lets go. The stars you can pick out by eye are almost all near neighbors within our own galaxy, and even they lie farther away than any number can make you feel. That is where we will begin. We begin not with the silence itself, but with the first and simplest reason for it, the plain, enormous distance that lies between the stars. Before we measure the distances, it is worth asking plainly what a meeting between 2 civilizations would actually require. We use the word meeting lightly, but in the setting of the cosmos, it asks for a great deal. It is not enough for 2 civilizations merely to exist. They must exist in a particular relationship to one another, lined up across several conditions at once, and each of those conditions turns out to be hard to satisfy on its own. The first thing a meeting needs is nearness. 2 civilizations must be close enough together that some signal or some craft could pass between them within a workable span of time. Nearness in the cosmos is a generous word, and even the nearest stars stretch it past comfort. But the principle is simple. If the gap is too wide, nothing that travels at any reachable speed can bridge it before the chance has passed. Distance is the first gate, and it is rarely open. The second thing a meeting needs is a shared moment. Both civilizations must be present at the same time, and not merely in the same century, but in overlapping windows, long enough for a signal to cross between them while both are still listening. This sounds easy until you remember how old the universe is and how brief a civilization tends to be. 2 lamps in a long night must be lit at once and near each other for either to see the other's glow. The third thing a meeting needs is the ability and the willingness to reach. At least one side must send something outward, a signal or a craft, and the other must be able to notice it and recognize it for what it is. A civilization might exist nearby at the right time and still be silent, either because it has no way to call across the gap or simply because it never chose to. Listening too is a choice, and a difficult one, requiring patience aimed in the right direction for a very long while. The fourth thing a meeting needs is a road that stays crossable. The space between the 2 civilizations must not be growing faster than their signals can move across it. On the scale of single galaxies, this condition is usually met, but across the wider cosmos, it quietly fails, as the gulfs between distant galaxies stretch faster than any message can keep up. A road that lengthens faster than you can walk, it is not a road at all. Set these 4 conditions side by side, and a pattern appears. Nearness, a shared moment, the will to reach, and a crossable road. Each one is a filter, and each one removes most of the candidates that passed the filter before it. A civilization might clear the first and fail the second. It might clear the first 3 and lose the fourth to the widening of space. To meet, a pair must pass through every gate at once, and the gates are narrow. This is why existence and contact pull so far apart. The universe may make life often, scattering it freely across its worlds, and still allow contact almost never, because contact must satisfy all 4 conditions together, while existence must satisfy only itself. A galaxy could hold many civilizations over its long history, and still arrange, through nothing more than its ordinary size and age, that almost none of them ever share a gate. It is worth noticing that these 4 conditions map cleanly onto the 4 separations we named a moment ago. Nearness is threatened by the separation of distance. A shared moment is threatened by the separation of time. The will and ability to reach run up against the separation of speed, which makes any reaching slow and any conversation long. And a crossable road is undone by the separation of expansion. The barriers are not random obstacles. They are exactly the conditions of meeting, seen from the other side. So when we ask why the universe makes it so hard for civilizations to meet, we are really asking why these 4 gates so rarely stand open together. The rest of the night is an unhurried walk through each gate in turn. We will feel how wide the distances are, how firm the speed limit is, how long the ages run, and how steadily the road lengthens. And we will let each one settle before moving to the next, the way the sky itself gives up its scale, only slowly, a little at a time. There is no need to hold all 4 in mind at once. Tonight they will come one after another, gently, each given room to be understood. For now we carry only the simple shape of the problem. A meeting needs nearness, a shared moment, a reaching, and a crossable road. With that quiet frame in place, we can turn to the first gate of all, and to the plain fact that the stars are farther apart than almost anyone allows themselves to feel. The first separation is the easiest to name and the hardest to truly feel. Space is enormous, and it is mostly empty. The distances between the stars are not large in the way an ocean is large, or a continent, or even a planet. They are large in a way that our senses were never shaped to hold, and the mind tends to slide off them rather than grasp them. To understand the silence, the first thing we must do is sit with that emptiness until it becomes real. Begin with light, because light gives us the fairest ruler we have. Light is the fastest thing there is, and it moves at a single steady pace through empty space. It crosses from the moon to the earth in a little over a second. It reaches us from the sun, far brighter and far more distant, in about 8 minutes. Those numbers already stretch our ordinary sense of nearness, and yet within the wider cosmos, the sun and moon are practically in our laps. Now send that same beam of light onward, past the edge of our own system, toward the very nearest neighboring star. It does not arrive in seconds, or in minutes, or even in months. It travels for more than 4 years before it reaches that star. More than 4 years, at the fastest pace the universe allows, simply to reach the closest sun to our own. And that star is a near neighbor, one of the handful within easy reach of our imagination. The next ones lie farther still. There is a quiet way to hold this scale that helps more than any raw number. Imagine shrinking the sun until it is no larger than a single grain of sand. On that scale, the next grain of sand, the nearest other star, would not sit beside it on the table. It would lie miles away, with nothing at all in the space between. 2 grains of sand, separated by miles of empty air, and that is the spacing of stars in our part of the galaxy. Picture that, and the usual image of a crowded sky quietly comes apart. Stars are not gathered together like trees in a forest, their branches nearly touching. They are scattered like a few grains of sand, thrown across an entire countryside. The night looks full only because our eyes gather faint light from enormous distances, drawing all those far points onto one small dome. The fullness is real, but it is the fullness of a few specks spread through an immense and patient emptiness. That emptiness is not quite nothing, but it is very close to it. The space between the stars holds a thin haze of gas and dust, far thinner than the finest mist, so sparse that whole stretches of it contain only a scattering of atoms in each small volume. There is more emptiness in a single span between 2 stars than in anything we ever meet on the ground. The cosmos is built mostly of emptiness, with its bright things set rarely and far between. This matters for our question because nearness is the first gate a meeting must pass. Even if a great many stars hosted civilizations, the plain spacing of the stars would set the nearest of those neighbors many years of light travel away. A simple greeting sent toward them would take those years to arrive. There is no shout loud enough and no light bright enough to shorten that gap, because the gap is not a matter of loudness. It is a matter of distance, and the distance is simply there. It is tempting to think that a sufficiently advanced civilization would brush all this aside, crossing between stars as easily as we cross a street. But the distances do not bend for cleverness. They are not a problem of engineering that better machines will dissolve. They are the background against which all engineering must work, and that background is wider than any vehicle we can presently imagine. The emptiness is not waiting to be defeated. It is simply the way the cosmos is laid out. And so the first separation settles into place quietly, without drama. The stars are far. They are farther than the words for far can carry. Between any world and its nearest possible neighbor lies a gulf measured in years of the fastest thing that exists. This alone would make meetings rare and slow. But distance is only the stage on which everything else plays out. The next separation is the rule that governs how anything at all may move across that stage, and it turns this wide emptiness into something firmer than mere distance. For now, let the emptiness simply be large. There is no need to feel small within it in any unhappy way. To be a single warm point in so much quiet emptiness is not a sad thing. It is only the truth of where we live, and it is the first reason the sky stays silent. The stars are not ignoring us. They are simply far, resting at distances that light itself takes years to cross, in a cosmos made mostly of the calm space in between. Now let the view widen, gently, from the gap between two stars to the whole turning wheel that holds them. Our galaxy is an enormous disk of a few 100 billion stars, bound loosely together and circling a common center. It is shaped something like a flattened pinwheel, with curving arms of brighter stars wound through a fainter glow. And it is so large that the numbers we used for single stars no longer reach. Our galaxy measures roughly 100,000 light-years from edge to edge. Hold that for a moment. Light, the fastest thing there is, the same light that took 4 years to reach the nearest star, would need 100,000 years to cross from one rim of our galaxy to the other. A civilization could rise on one edge, send a beam of light toward the far side, and that beam would still be traveling long after the civilization that sent it had faded entirely from the universe. Within that enormous disk, a few 100 billion stars sounds like a crowd, and in a sense, it is. But spread that crowd through a volume 100,000 light-years wide and a few thousand light-years thick, and it thins to almost nothing. The stars are set far apart, each one with its own wide territory of empty space around it. The galaxy is bright to look at only because we see all those scattered points at once, gathered onto a single band across the sky. Our own sun sits partway out from the center, in a calm and unremarkable stretch of one of the spiral arms. It is not near the crowded middle, nor lost at the lonely edge. It drifts in the quiet suburbs, circling the galactic center slowly, taking hundreds of millions of years to complete a single lap. All around it, the other stars drift too, each on its own long orbit, so that the whole galaxy turns like a great slow wheel that no single life could ever watch move. Suppose now that this galaxy is generous with life. Suppose a great many of its stars hold worlds, and a fraction of those worlds hold civilizations. Even then, the simple arithmetic of spacing keeps them far apart. Scatter even a large number of civilizations through a disk this size, and the typical distance from any one of them to the next would still be measured in many years of light travel, often in tens or hundreds of such years. Nearness, the first gate of meeting, stays shut for almost every pair, and there is no shortcut hidden in the galaxy's slow turning. The stars do move, carried along on their orbits, but they move together, keeping their wide spacing as they go, like a flock that holds its shape. Two civilizations do not drift toward one another over a few generations. The galaxy rearranges its pattern only across spans far longer than any civilization is likely to last. Motion does not rescue us from distance. It only carries the same distances in a slow circle. Then comes the next widening, and it is the largest yet. Beyond the edge of our own galaxy lies not more of the same, but a far greater emptiness. And then, across it, other galaxies, entirely. The nearest large spiral to our own lies, more than 2 million light-years away, with almost nothing in the immense gap between. The light reaching us from that galaxy tonight set out on its journey before our own kind of human being walked the earth. If civilizations are spread not only across our galaxy, but among different galaxies, then the distances separating them are no longer measured in years of light travel, or even thousands of years, but in millions. At that range, the very idea of a conversation quietly dissolves. There can be no exchange, No back and forth, only the slow one-way arrival of ancient light, carrying news of a place as it was an unthinkable span ago, long before anyone here existed to receive it. Our galaxy is not alone, of course. It travels with a small family of neighboring galaxies, bound together by gravity into what we might call our local gathering. That family will stay together, and we will return to its quiet fate later in the night. But beyond that small bound group, the galaxies are arranged across the cosmos in long, delicate threads and sheets, with enormous empty spaces between them, like a faint cobweb hung through the dark on the largest scale there is. It is worth pausing on what a few 100 billion stars truly means, because such a number slides past the mind, almost without leaving a mark. Imagine trying to count them, one for every second, never stopping to rest or sleep. You would not finish in a single lifetime, nor in 100 lifetimes laid end to end. You would still be counting long after your own civilization had risen, flourished, and passed quietly from the world. And each of those uncounted points is a sun in its own right, many of them ringed by worlds, every one of them set apart from the next, by years upon years of light. So when we picture searching the galaxy for another civilization, we are not picturing a search that any patience could ever complete. We are picturing a field so wide that one could look outward in every direction, steadily, for the whole of history, and still examine only the smallest corner of it. The numbers do not merely describe how large the galaxy is. They quietly undo the very idea of searching it from end to end, and they remind us that even a galaxy generous with life could hide its many lights from one another simply by being as large as it is. Those empty spaces are the largest features in all of nature. They are mostly, almost perfectly, empty, immense rounded gulfs across which even light grows lonely. The bright galaxies cling to the threads at the edges of the gulfs, gathered into clusters and strung along filaments, and between the threads lie these enormous quiet voids. To meet across one of them is not difficult. It is, for any ordinary means, simply impossible. So the first separation, the separation of distance, deepens at every scale we examine. Between stars, it is years of light. Across a galaxy, it is 100,000 years of light. Between galaxies, it is millions. And across the great voids, it is more still. At every step outward, the emptiness grows faster than anything can hope to cross it. Distance alone, taken to the scale of the whole cosmos, is already nearly enough to keep every civilization apart. And still distance is only the stage. It tells us how far things are, but not how fast anything may travel between them. For that, we need the second separation, the firm and quiet rule that sets the pace of everything that moves. It is the rule that turns all this enormous distance from a slow problem into a settled one, and it is where we turn next, gently, as the scale of the stars settles back down into the calm it came from. All that distance would still be bearable if we could cross it quickly, or even speak across it quickly. A wide ocean is no barrier to a fast enough ship. So the natural hope is that distance, however enormous, might simply be outrun by speed. The second separation is the quiet closing of that hope. The universe enforces a single, firm speed limit, and that limit turns the wide gaps of distance into something far more settled than mere width. Light travels at one particular speed through empty space, and nothing that carries matter, energy, or information is permitted to move faster. This is not a limit of our machines, waiting to be overcome by better engineering. It is woven into the structure of space and time themselves. The limit was not placed in our path by anyone. It is simply one of the fixed features of the universe, as basic as the fact that the cosmos has any shape at all. One of the quiet hints that this speed is truly fundamental is how often it appears where light is nowhere in sight. The same speed shows up across the whole of physics, binding together things that seem to have nothing to do with one another, surfacing in the behavior of matter and energy in setting after setting. It behaves less like the property of one particular thing called light, and more like a property of reality itself, a number stitched into the fabric of everything. Because this speed is the fastest anything can go, it sets the pace for every possible greeting. The quickest message a civilization could ever send, whether a flash of light, a pulse of radio, or a narrow beam aimed across the dark, still travels only at this one speed and no faster. There is no swifter channel waiting to be discovered, no hidden express lane beneath the ordinary one. When we say the speed of light, we are really naming the speed of cause and effect, the rate at which any influence may pass from one place to another. It helps to understand why nothing with mass can simply be pushed past this speed. As an object moves faster, it grows harder and harder to speed up further, as though it were gathering resistance with every gain. To reach the speed of light, an object with any mass at all would need not merely a great deal of energy, but an endless amount, a supply with no limit. The closer it crept toward the limit, the steeper the climb would become, and the summit would keep its distance no matter what. There is a calm image that holds this well. The speed of light is not a fence at the edge of a field, the kind a fast enough runner might one day clear with a great leap. It is more like the horizon itself. No matter how fast you move toward it, it stays exactly as far ahead as before, holding its distance with perfect patience. The faster you go, the more the universe quietly rearranges itself to keep that one speed fixed for everyone, in every direction. So light is the swiftest messenger the cosmos allows, and yet, set against the distances we have already walked through, even light is slow. It crawls across a galaxy in 100,000 years. It drifts between galaxies for millions. The fastest thing that exists is still far too slow to knit the cosmos into anything resembling a neighborhood. The speed limit does not shrink the distances. It freezes them, fixing how long every crossing must take and forbidding any way to make it shorter. This is the moment when distance hardens into something final. Before the speed limit, one might imagine that a clever enough civilization would simply build a faster ship and brush the gaps aside. After the speed limit, that hope quietly closes. The gaps are not merely wide. They are wide in a universe where the fastest possible crossing is fixed, and the fixed crossing times are longer than civilizations themselves tend to last. The distance has become a wall not because it is solid, but because nothing may cross it quickly. And yet there is no cruelty in this limit, and it is worth saying so even now, before we have earned the full comfort of it. The same rule that keeps the stars beyond easy reach is the rule that keeps cause firmly before effect, that keeps the universe orderly and sensible from one moment to the next. We will return to that gift at the end of the night. For now, it is enough to feel the limit settle into place, quiet and immovable. The second reason the sky stays silent: distance set the stars far apart. The speed limit fixed how slowly we may approach them. Together, those two separations would already make most meetings impossible. But the most surprising barrier is still ahead, and it is not measured in space at all. Before we reach it, though, we should sit with what the speed limit does to the simple act of talking, because it is there, in the unraveling of a conversation, that the second separation is felt most clearly of all. Imagine, for a moment, that two civilizations have somehow cleared the first gate. Imagine they are near each other, as nearness goes in the cosmos, set only a handful of light years apart. They cannot travel between their worlds, but perhaps they can talk. Perhaps a signal sent at the speed of light could carry a greeting across the gap. This is the most hopeful version of contact, the gentlest one, and it is worth following carefully to see where it leads. Suppose one civilization sends a message toward the nearest neighboring star, the one more than 4 light years away. The message travels at the fastest pace the universe allows, and it arrives, faithfully, more than 4 years later. Suppose the others are listening, and they answer at once, the very moment the message arrives. Their reply travels back across the same gap, at the same fixed speed, and it reaches the first world more than 4 years after that. A single round, one hello and one answer, has taken the better part of a decade. And that is the closest case imaginable, the very nearest star. Aim the message instead at a world on the far side of our own galaxy, and a single exchange stretches across spans longer than all of recorded human history, in each direction. A question sent now would arrive in a future so distant that the civilization which asked it would almost certainly be gone before any answer began its journey home. The conversation does not fail because anyone refuses to speak. It fails because the line is simply too long to hold. This is the quiet center of the second separation. The speed limit does not merely slow a conversation down to something inconvenient. At the distances between the stars, it stretches a single back and forth across spans longer than civilizations themselves tend to last. Two peoples could be patient, sincere, and entirely willing, each one listening faithfully for a reply, and still neither could complete a single exchange before one of them had passed from the universe. The channel is open. It is only far too long for any single life or any single civilization to wait out. There is something almost tender in that picture, rather than something frightening. Two distant peoples, each calling gently into the dark, each waiting for an answer that travels as fast as anything can, and still takes longer than empires last. They are not ignoring one another. They are simply speaking across a gap so wide that the words outlive the speakers. To converse across the stars, a civilization would need not merely the will to talk, but a patience measured in the rise and fall of whole histories. If talking across the gap is this hard, then crossing it in person is harder still by far. A signal, at least, weighs nothing and may move at the full speed of light. A ship carries mass, and mass is exactly what the speed limit punishes most. To push a vessel even partway toward the speed of light would demand an outlay of energy beyond anything a civilization is likely ever to gather, and then a second, matching effort to slow the vessel down again at the far end, so that it arrives rather than rushing past. To feel how slow our own real travel is, consider the fastest craft we have ever launched into space. Set against the gulf to the nearest star, those swift machines barely move at all. Traveling at the speeds we can actually reach, a vessel would need tens of thousands of years simply to arrive at the closest neighboring sun. A journey begun at the dawn of a civilization would still be underway long after that civilization had changed past recognition or vanished entirely, leaving its lone ship coasting silently onward through the dark. There are gentle ways one can imagine around this, and they are worth a quiet mention. A civilization might send, not living travelers, but a slow ship meant to carry many generations, a small world sealed against the dark, its passengers living and dying along the way so that distant descendants might arrive. Or it might send no travelers at all, only patient machines. But every such answer accepts the same hard fact at its root. The crossing takes so long that those who set out are never those who arrive, and contact if it ever comes, belongs to a future almost unrecognizable to the present that reached for it. So the speed limit closes both doors at once, the door of travel and the door of speech. We cannot easily cross the distances of the first separation, and we cannot easily converse across them either. Light is the swiftest thing the universe contains, and even light is too slow to draw the cosmos into a neighborhood where greetings might pass and answers might return. The two separations, distance and speed, work quietly together, and between them they would already be nearly enough. And yet, as settled as these two barriers are, they are not the deepest of the four. There remains a separation that no faster ship and no brighter signal could ever cross, because it is not a matter of space at all. It is a matter of time, of when a civilization exists rather than where, and it is the quiet center of the whole night. We turn to it now, slowly, as the long distances and the fixed speed settle behind us into the calm from which they came. We come now to the quietest of the four separations, and in many ways the most surprising. The first two were barriers of space. They told us how far apart the stars are, and how slowly anything may move between them. But there is a third barrier that no faster ship and no brighter signal could ever cross, because it is not a matter of where a civilization sits at all. It is a matter of when. Two peoples might be near each other in space, and the speed limit might somehow be kind, and they would still miss one another entirely if they simply lived at different times. To feel this barrier, we must first sit with the age of the universe, because it is older than almost anyone lets themselves imagine. The cosmos has been turning for something close to 14 billion years. That is not a number the mind can truly hold. We can say it, and we can write it down, but the feeling of it slips away, because nothing in a human life prepares us for a span so long. Whole kinds of stars have been born, have lived out their lives, and have died, again and again, across that immense stretch of time. Against that age, the lifetime of a civilization is a flicker. Suppose a civilization, once it learns to send signals into space, lasts for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands. By the measure of a single human life, that is almost forever. By the measure of the universe, it is the briefest flash, a spark struck and gone while the long night barely changes. Even a civilization far steadier and longer lived than anything we have known would occupy only the thinnest sliver of cosmic history. There is a way of picturing this that makes it gentle rather than dizzying. Imagine the entire history of the universe pressed down into a single long night, from dusk to dawn. On that scale, all of recorded human history would occupy far less than the final second before sunrise. A civilization that lasted for many thousands of years would still shine for less than the blink of an eye against that whole long darkness. The night is simply that long, and our brightest chapters are simply that short. Now take that single brief blink and imagine many of them scattered at random across the whole length of the night. Some flicker near the beginning, in the early hours, when the universe was young. Some appear in the middle. Some have not yet been struck at all and will only flare near morning. Each one burns for less than an instant, and then it is gone. This is the picture we must hold. Not an empty night, but a night sprinkled with brief, separate sparks, almost none of them lit at the same moment. The chance that any two of those sparks flare at once, and close enough together to catch each other's light, becomes very small. Not because the sparks are rare, necessarily. The night might be full of them across its whole length. They are simply spread thin across time itself, each one brief, each one appearing at its own hour. A universe could produce a great many civilizations over its long history, and still almost never hold two of them at the same moment, in the same small region, both shining together. This is the separation people most often forget when they look up and wonder. We tend to picture other civilizations as if they are out there right now, present and waiting, as though all the lamps of the cosmos were lit together in one shared evening. But now is a very narrow word in a universe this old. The present moment is a single thin slice through an immense stretch of time, and there is no reason the sparks should cluster within it. Most of them belong to other hours of the night entirely. Consider what this means for the nearest possible neighbor. A civilization might have arisen somewhere close to us, as cosmic distances go, long before the Earth had even finished forming. It might have flourished for ages and faded away while our world was still a ball of molten rock, with no ocean and no sky worth the name. From where we stand, that neighbor is not hidden. It is simply long past, separated from us not by light years but by eons, gone before we were here to look. And the same is true in the other direction. A civilization that will one day arise near us might not appear until our own sun has aged and changed, perhaps not until it has died altogether. They would be our neighbors in space, and still utterly beyond reach, because the time that separates us is wider than any signal can bridge. We could share a region of the galaxy with a great many civilizations across its long life, and never once share the present moment with a single one of them. We do not know how long civilizations tend to last, and that single unknown turns out to matter more than almost anything else. If they endure for ages, then many might overlap, and the night might hold several sparks at once. If they tend to be brief, flaring and fading quickly, then the sparks are spread so thin that overlap becomes nearly impossible. The whole question of meeting may hinge less on how often life begins than on how long its brightest chapter lasts once it has started. There is a softer way to say all of this, and it is worth carrying. Even in a galaxy full of life, everyone may be alone, and not because no one else exists. They may be alone because no one else exists yet, or because no one else exists still. The cosmos seems to hand out its sparks one at a time, across an enormous reach of time, and only rarely lets two of them burn together. The loneliness, if we must call it that, is a matter of timing far more than of absence. And there is a strange comfort hidden in that, which we will let grow as the night goes on. To be separated by time is not to be rejected. It is not that the others looked at us and turned away. It is only that we arrived at our own hour, as every spark does, and our hour did not happen to align with theirs. We are not shut out of anything. We are simply here now, in our own brief flare of light, in a night so long that meeting was never likely. That is not a wound. It is only the shape of time, and we turn next to how it feels from the inside by looking honestly at our own thin moment. It is one thing to speak of civilizations as sparks across a long night. It is another to feel that we ourselves are one of those sparks, brief and faint, and to see just how thin our own moment really is. The clearest way to understand the separation of time is to turn the question inward and ask how we would appear to anyone else who happened to be looking. The answer is humbling, and in its own quiet way, it is also calming. Our own kind has existed for a very short while, and our ability to send anything at all into space is briefer still. For almost the whole of our history, we were silent in the way the rest of the universe is silent, giving off no signal that could carry beyond our own world. It is only within roughly the last century that we have sent anything outward at all, only a single long human lifetime out of the Earth's billions of years. On the scale of the cosmos, we began to speak a heartbeat ago. Those earliest signals, the first faint broadcasts to leak past our atmosphere, have been spreading outward ever since, racing away from us at the speed of light. They form a thin, expanding shell around our world, growing by 1 light-year for every year that passes. It sounds enormous, and by human measure it is. But set against the size of the galaxy, that shell is almost nothing. It has reached only a small handful of the nearest stars, a tiny pocket of our immediate surroundings, while the rest of the galaxy remains entirely untouched by any word of us. And those first signals grow fainter as they travel, thinning and weakening with every light year until they fade into the natural murmur of the cosmos. The farther they go, the harder they would be to pick out from the quiet hiss of the universe itself. A civilization would need to be both near and remarkably attentive to notice them at all. Our presence in the wider galaxy is not a shout. It is the faintest whisper, dissolving quickly into the dark not far from where it began. Set our whole detectable existence against the galaxy, and it becomes smaller than a single drop in an ocean. A thin bubble, 100 or so light-years across, in a galaxy 100,000 light-years wide, is less than the smallest mark on the largest map. And that bubble has existed for only the briefest instant of cosmic time, a flicker just beginning. If our entire technological life so far were placed on that compressed single night of cosmic history, it would not yet amount to the first part of the last fraction of the final second. Now imagine another civilization, somewhere among the nearer stars, that happened to turn its attention toward our sun at some point in the past. If they looked a few thousand years ago, they would have found a quiet world, green and blue and alive, but giving off nothing technological at all, nothing to suggest a civilization was stirring. They would have seen a living planet and moved on, with no reason to wait. Our entire signaling age would still have lain far in their future, invisible to them. And if they look a few thousand years from now, they may find nothing technological either, depending on what becomes of us. Our window of loud, detectable activity might prove to be brief, a short, bright passage between a long silence before and a long silence after. The span during which we are both present and noticeable may be only a thin slice of even our own short story. That is how narrow a civilization's window can be, and there is no reason to think ours is unusually wide. If our own window is this thin, then so, most likely, are theirs. Each civilization may be loud and visible for only a brief passage, surrounded on both sides by quiet. For two such windows to overlap, and to fall near each other in space, and to face the right direction at the right time, asks for a coincidence of moments, stacked upon a coincidence of places. It is not that the universe forbids it. It is only that the windows are so narrow, and the night so long, that alignment almost never comes. This is why the silence overhead is not, by itself, evidence of an empty cosmos. We have been listening carefully for only a few decades, with instruments that can catch only the nearest and loudest of signals during a single thin slice of cosmic time. We are like someone who opens a window for a moment on one quiet night and, hearing nothing, concludes the whole world must be empty. The world might simply be sleeping, or speaking elsewhere, or speaking at another hour than the one we happen to choose. And so the separation of time, felt from the inside, turns out to be oddly gentle. We are not being ignored. We are early risers in a long night, or perhaps latecomers to a gathering already ended, and we cannot yet tell which. Either way, the quiet is not a verdict on whether we are alone. It is only the natural sound of a brief spark, listening for other brief sparks across a stretch of time too long for any of them to span. We have looked for a moment, and heard a moment's worth of silence, and that is all the silence yet means. With the three separations of distance, speed, and time now behind us, we might think the case is complete. Together, they would already make meeting almost impossible, scattering civilizations too far apart, too slow to reach, and too brief to overlap. But there is a fourth separation still ahead, and it is the one that turns near impossibility into something closer to permanence. It is the slow widening of space itself, and we turn to it now, gently, as the long ages settle back into stillness. The first three separations are, in a sense, fixed. The distances between the stars are enormous, but they hold roughly steady. The speed limit does not change. The age of the universe simply grows, carrying its scattered sparks along. If those were the only barriers, the situation would be difficult but stable, the same tonight as 1 billion years ago. But the fourth separation is different in a way that matters enormously. It is not fixed. It is growing. Space itself is expanding, and that expansion is quietly closing doors that will never open again. The space between distant galaxies is not still. It is stretching, lengthening everywhere at once, carrying the galaxies away from one another as it grows. This is the part that is easy to misunderstand, so it is worth saying carefully. The galaxies are not flying apart through space, like fragments hurled outward from a center. It is the space between them that is swelling, expanding in every direction, so that the gaps widen on their own. The galaxies mostly sit still in their own neighborhoods, while the distances between those neighborhoods quietly increase. A familiar image helps here. Imagine a loaf of bread rising in a warm kitchen, with raisins scattered through the dough. As the dough swells, every raisin moves away from every other raisin, not because the raisins are crawling through the dough, but because the dough itself is expanding between them. From the viewpoint of any one raisin, all the others drift away, and the more distant ones recede the fastest. The galaxies are the raisins, and the rising dough is space itself, swelling gently in every direction. This expansion has a consequence that sounds impossible at first, and yet breaks no rule at all. Because space can stretch as quickly as it likes, and because there is so much of it between us and the most distant galaxies, the total stretching across those enormous gaps can add up faster than light can cross them. Beyond a certain distance, galaxies are carried away from us more quickly than their light can travel toward us. They are not moving through space faster than light. The space between us is simply growing faster than light can keep pace with. Picture the light from such a galaxy setting out toward us, doing its faithful best, moving at the only speed it knows. And picture the road beneath it lengthening faster than it can advance, so that for all its speed, it loses ground. It is like a swimmer setting out toward a shore that drifts away faster than they can swim. No matter how strong the effort, the distance grows. Past a certain line, the light of those galaxies will never reach us, and nothing we send will ever reach them. There is a quiet strangeness in knowing that this is happening even now, as you rest, without any sound or motion that a single life could ever feel. The galaxies that are slipping beyond reach do not flicker or dim before our eyes. They look, tonight, exactly as they always have, their light arriving as faithfully as ever it did. And yet the gentle arithmetic of the widening has already carried many of them past the point of any return. We are watching, in the present, places that have in truth already left us, still glowing with light that escaped while the road between us was open. It is a little like feeling the warmth of a fire whose embers have already gone cold, the glow outlasting the thing that made it. Nothing in the sight itself warns us of the change. The widening keeps its own slow counsel, asking nothing of us and announcing nothing at all, simply lengthening the longest roads a little further with every age that turns. And so the sky we see is, in part, a gallery of farewells we never noticed being spoken, each distant light, a gentle goodbye, still on its way to us. That line has a quiet name. We can call it the horizon of contact, the boundary beyond which the widening of space outpaces anything that tries to cross it. Within that horizon, in principle, a signal might still complete its journey, given enough patience. Beyond it, the door is shut, not by distance alone, but by distance that grows faster than crossing. And the expansion is not steady. It is gradually speeding up, pushed along by something woven into empty space itself, an effect that grows stronger as the universe ages and the gaps grow wider. What makes this the gravest of the four separations is exactly that it grows. The other three hold their ground. This one advances. With every age that passes, the horizon of contact draws inward, and more of the distant cosmos slips beyond it. Galaxies that might once, in principle, have been reachable are carried past the line and into permanent isolation. The window for contact across the wider universe is not merely narrow. It is slowly and steadily closing, one galaxy at a time, and it will not reopen. It is worth pausing on how strange and quiet this process is. There is no sound to it, no visible motion, nothing a single life could ever notice. The galaxies do not appear to race away when we look at them tonight. The change unfolds across spans so long that, from inside any one moment, the universe seems perfectly still. And yet, it is not still. It is gently coming apart on the largest scale, the bright islands of the cosmos drifting away from one another into ever greater solitude, slowly enough that the drifting feels like rest. For our question, the meaning is clear and sobering, though we will hold it gently. Most of the civilizations that might ever exist across the wider universe are not merely far from one another. They are being carried apart faster than any of them could ever signal across the gap, and the separation deepens with time. Whole galaxies full of possible life are sliding beyond every horizon, not because anyone moved, but because the space between simply grew. The cosmos is not only large, it is becoming larger in the very places that would keep its inhabitants apart. And yet, even here, we will find calm before the end, for the expansion that isolates us is bound up with the same beginning that made the universe at all. There is more to say about where this widening leads, and about a far future in which our own small family of galaxies is left alone in the dark. We turn to that next, slowly. For now it is enough to feel the fourth separation settle into place beside the others, the quiet, patient growth of space, gently carrying the far things farther and closing the longest roads for good. It is tempting to think of the widening of space as a problem only for the far future, something that will isolate distant descendants long after we are gone. But the strange truth is that most of the cosmos is already beyond our reach, tonight as you rest. The expansion has been at work for a very long time, and it has already carried the greater part of the visible universe past the line where contact could ever be made. The doors did not all close at once. Most of them are already shut. Consider what this means when we look out at the farthest galaxies. Their light still reaches us, faint and ancient, gathered by our instruments after an immense journey. So we can see them. They are part of the sky we can map and study and admire. And yet, for the overwhelming majority of them, the space between us and them has already grown too quickly for any message of ours to ever arrive, or any message of theirs to ever complete the trip to us. We can see them, and we can never touch them. This is one of the gentlest paradoxes in all of nature. To see a thing is not the same as to be able to reach it. The light arriving tonight from a remote galaxy left it long ago, when the gap between us was far smaller and the journey was still possible. The light made it across before the door closed. But anything sent now, in either direction, sets out into a gap that is already widening too fast to cross. We are looking at places we could never visit and never call, watching them by light that escaped while there was still time. The numbers, if we let ourselves picture them, are quietly staggering. Of all the galaxies we can presently see, only a small fraction remain within the horizon of contact. The rest, the great majority, have already passed beyond it. They glow in our telescopes as they were in the distant past, but they are, for any practical purpose, already gone from our reach forever. We share a sky with them, and nothing more. The cosmos we can observe is far larger than the cosmos we could ever, even in principle, hope to touch. And the line keeps moving inward. With every passing age, more galaxies are carried across that boundary and join the unreachable. They do not vanish from sight at once. They simply slip, one by one, out of the region that any signal could ever cross, and into the larger region we may only watch. The number of galaxies we could, in principle, reach grows smaller all the time, quietly, without any drama, like a tide going out so slowly that no one standing on the shore could ever see it move. For our question, this deepens the silence in a particular way. It is not only that other civilizations are far and slow to reach and scattered across time. It is that most of the universe's possible homes for life have already drifted beyond any contact at all, sealed away by the growth of space before we ever knew to look for them. Whatever lives in those distant galaxies, if anything does, is already past every horizon we could ever cross. They are not hidden. They are simply on the far side of a gap that closed long ago. There is, however, a quiet privilege in our moment that is worth holding on to. We live early enough in the history of the cosmos that we can still see those distant galaxies at all. Their light still reaches us. We can still know that the universe is large and full of other islands of stars, even if we can never visit them. That knowledge is itself a kind of gift, one that will not always be available, as we are about to see. To look up and find the sky full of other galaxies is a privilege of living near the beginning. So even now, tonight, the universe is quietly larger than it is reachable, and the gap between the two is growing. Most of what we can see, we could never touch. Most of the cosmos has already said its only word to us, in light that left long ago, and will never hear anything we might say in return. This is not a wall raised against us in particular. It is simply the slow geometry of an expanding universe, closing its longest roads gently, while we rest beneath the light of places we have already, in every way that matters, lost. And if so much is already beyond reach now, the far future carries this isolation to its quiet conclusion. There comes a time, immensely distant, when the widening of space will leave our small corner of the cosmos nearly alone in the dark. That future is strange and oddly peaceful to consider, and it tells us something about how rare and precious our own well-placed moment really is. We turn to it next, slowly, as the distant galaxies settle back into the calm of being seen but never reached. Let us travel forward in time, far beyond any span we usually allow ourselves to imagine, and see what becomes of the sky. The expansion of space does not pause or reverse. It continues, and it gradually quickens, carrying the distant galaxies ever farther away and ever faster. Over spans of time, almost beyond naming, the consequences gather, until the universe a soul might see from our own location looks profoundly different from the one we see tonight. The far future is a quieter place, and its quiet has something to teach us. Our own galaxy, as we have said, does not travel alone. It moves together with a small family of neighboring galaxies, bound to one another by gravity into a single gathering. Gravity, within that family, is stronger than the gentle push of expansion, and so these galaxies will not be carried apart. They will stay together. In fact, drawn by their mutual pull, they will slowly fall toward one another over enormous spans of time, drifting closer until at last they merge into a single great island of stars. But everything beyond that bound family is a different story. All the other galaxies, the countless islands of stars that fill our sky tonight, are not bound to us. They lie beyond the reach of our small family's gravity, and so the expansion of space carries them away without resistance. One by one, across unimaginable stretches of time, they recede, growing more distant and faster receding, their light stretching and dimming until each of them slips past the horizon and fades from view entirely. The sky slowly empties of its galaxies. Imagine a civilization arising in that distant future, on some world within our merged island of stars, looking up at its night sky for the first time. It would see its own galaxy around it, full of stars, bright and complete. But beyond that island, it would see only darkness. The other galaxies would all have receded past the horizon and vanished. There would be no faint smudges of distant light, no sign at all that anything existed beyond the single island in which that civilization found itself. The visible universe for them would be one galaxy, surrounded by an empty dark. And here is the part that stays with you. That future civilization, studying its sky as carefully as we study ours, would have no way to know that the cosmos had ever been otherwise. The evidence would be gone, carried beyond every horizon. They might reasonably conclude that their single island of stars was the whole of creation, eternal and alone, with nothing beyond it and nothing before it. The truth of an immense universe once full of galaxies would be utterly invisible to them, erased not by any catastrophe, but simply by the patient growth of space. This casts our own moment in a tender light. We live early enough that the sky is still full. We can still see the other galaxies, still gather their ancient light, still know that the universe is large and layered and full of distant islands. We happen to arrive while the evidence is still here to be read, while the cosmos still tells the story of its own size. A civilization born too late would be denied all of that, not through any fault of its own, but simply by living after the doors had closed and the far lights had gone. So if our location in time keeps us from meeting our neighbors, it also grants us something they may never have. It grants us the chance to know how large the universe truly is, while that knowledge is still legible in the sky. We are lonely in the present, perhaps, scattered too far in space and time to gather with anyone. But we are fortunate in a different way. We can still see almost everything, even if we can touch almost none of it. The full sky overhead is a privilege of the early. There is a humbling lesson folded into that distant future, and it reaches back gently to touch us now. It tells us that what a civilization can see is not the whole of what is true, but only the part the universe has left legible in its particular moment. A people born too late would read an honest, careful, and entirely mistaken story from their empty sky, concluding in good faith that their single island was all there had ever been. They would not be foolish. They would simply be reading the only evidence still left to them. And that invites a quiet question about ourselves. If the sky can hide its own larger truth from a future people, then perhaps our own sky, full as it looks tonight, already keeps things from us that an earlier age could once have read, and we no longer can. We are neither the first to look up, nor the last. We are one moment of watchers among many, each seeing what our own hour allows, no more and no less. There is a strange tenderness in that thought, in being handed a sky to read and knowing it is only ever a page, never the whole of the book. There is a quiet symmetry in all of this that is worth resting on. The same expansion that isolates us, that carries the galaxies away and closes the longest roads, is also part of what allows a universe to exist and to last at all. It is woven into the same beginning that set everything in motion, the same unfolding that made space for stars and worlds and, in at least one place, for watchers who could look up and wonder. The widening dark is not a flaw in the design. It is part of the design, and we are here, in the brief, bright window when its full story can still be seen. We have now walked through all 4 separations, each in its turn, and felt how each one alone would already make meeting difficult, and how the 4th carries the difficulty toward permanence. Before we ask the older question, the one about where everyone is, it is worth gathering the 4 together in one quiet view, so that we can feel how they layer and compound. We turn to that gentle summing up next, as the empty far future sky settles back into the full and generous one above us tonight. Let us pause and gather the 4 separations into a single view, the way you might step back from a wide picture to see how its parts fit together. We have taken them one at a time, slowly, each given its own space to be understood. But their real power is not in any one of them alone. It is in the way they layer upon one another, each one deepening the rest, until between them they very nearly seal the cosmos against any meeting at all. Seen together, they form a quiet and complete answer. The first separation is distance. The stars are set enormously far apart, scattered like a few grains of sand across a whole countryside, with years of light travel between even the nearest of them, and far more between galaxies. On its own, distance makes neighbors rare and far. It opens the gaps that everything else must struggle across. It is the stage, immense and mostly empty, on which the whole question plays out. The second separation is speed. Across those enormous distances, nothing may travel faster than light, and light itself, the swiftest thing there is far too slow to bridge them quickly. Distance alone might be outrun by a fast enough ship, but the speed limit forbids the ship. It takes the wide gaps and fixes how long they must take to cross, freezing the distances into firm walls of time. Together, distance and speed make every crossing not merely long, but unchangeably long. The third separation is time. The universe is so old and civilizations so brief that even near neighbors are likely to exist at entirely different hours of the long cosmic night. 2 sparks must be lit at the same moment and close together to catch each other's light, and the night is so long that this almost never happens. Distance scatters civilizations across space. Time scatters them across the ages. A pair might clear the first 2 barriers and still simply miss each other by an eon. The 4th separation is expansion. Space itself is growing, carrying the distant galaxies away faster than any signal could ever follow, and the growth quickens with time. It takes the difficulty of the first 3 and makes it permanent, sealing away more of the cosmos with every passing age. Even the chance of contact across the wider universe is not merely small. It is shrinking, the longest roads closing for good, the far islands drifting beyond every horizon. Now feel how they compound. Distance makes neighbors far. The speed limit makes the far ones slow to reach, too slow for any single life. Time makes the slow ones miss one another entirely, scattered across hours of the night that never overlap. And expansion makes the missing permanent, carrying away forever those who were already too far, too slow, and too briefly present to find. Each barrier alone would be formidable. Stacked together, they leave almost no path through. And yet there is no malice anywhere in the stack. This is the thing to hold on to as the four settle into place. No one designed these barriers to keep us lonely. They are simply the ordinary features of a universe that is large, governed by a fixed speed, ancient and growing. The same four features, in slightly different arrangements, are exactly what allowed stars to form and worlds to gather, and life to arise slowly on at least one of them. The separations are not a cage built around us. They are the shape of the place we were born in, if we may call it a place at all. So when someone asks why the universe makes it so hard for civilizations to meet, this is the whole of the answer, gathered in one place. It is hard because the cosmos is enormous, because nothing may cross it quickly, because it is old enough to spread its sparks thin across time, and because it is widening fast enough to carry the far ones permanently away. Four ordinary truths, each gentle on its own, combine into something very close to a closed door. The silence overhead is not a mystery once the four are seen together. It is exactly what such a universe would sound like. With the four separations gathered and understood, we are finally ready to return to the older question, the famous one, the one usually asked with a touch of unease. If the galaxy is so old and so large, where is everybody? We can ask it now without any fear, because we already hold the answer in our hands. We turn to that question next, and to the gentle, almost reassuring shape the silence takes once we understand what made it. The four separations settle behind us now, and the old question rises softly in their place. Before we ask where everyone is, it is fair to ask how many there might be in the first place. If the universe is reluctant to let civilizations meet, we should still like to know how crowded it is behind that reluctance. There is a familiar and gentle way to think this through, not a precise calculation, but a chain of questions, each one narrowing the field a little further. It is less a piece of arithmetic than a slow walk down a series of quiet ifs. Begin with the number of stars, which is the easiest part, because it is staggeringly large. Our galaxy alone holds a few 100 billion of them, and there are hundreds of billions of galaxies beyond it. Whatever else is true, there is no shortage of suns. The cosmos begins this chain with a number so enormous that even after many narrowings, a great deal might still remain. So we start from abundance, with more stars than anyone could ever count in many lifetimes. Then ask how many of those stars have planets, and the answer, as far as we can tell, is most of them. Worlds appear to be common, forming naturally around stars as they are born, so that planets number in the same staggering range as the stars themselves. This is one of the quieter discoveries of recent times, and it keeps the chain generous at its second link. The galaxy is not a field of lonely suns. It is a galaxy of worlds, uncounted and varied, circling nearly every star. Then ask how many of those worlds sit at a comfortable distance from their star, where conditions are mild enough for the gentle chemistry that life seems to need. Not too close where everything bakes, and not too far where everything freezes, but somewhere in the temperate middle where water might rest as a liquid. This narrows the field, but not to nothing. Even a modest fraction of so many worlds leaves an enormous number of mild and promising places scattered through the galaxy. Then come the harder, less certain links, where our confidence thins. How many of those mild worlds actually give rise to life at all? How many of the living worlds eventually bring forth a creature that wonders and builds and looks up with questions? How many of those go on to send signals outward into space, becoming the kind of civilization another might one day notice? At each of these steps, we are far less sure of the fraction, and the honest truth is that we are mostly guessing. And then comes the final link, the most uncertain of them all. How long does such a civilization last once it has begun to send its signals into the dark? This is the question we understand least, and as we will see, it may matter most of all. Each step in the chain multiplies a large number by some fraction, and with every fraction, the field grows smaller. Begin with an almost limitless number of stars, narrow it again and again, and the final count can land almost anywhere at all. That is the honest result of the chain. Depending on the fractions one chooses, the same reasoning can yield a galaxy quietly teeming with civilizations, or a galaxy in which we are the only one. Thoughtful, careful people, looking at the very same chain, reach wildly different answers, because the uncertain links can be turned up or down by enormous amounts, and no one can yet say which setting is right. The chain does not give us a number. It gives us a range so wide that it stretches from solitude to abundance. This might sound like a failure, but it is really a lesson in humility, and humility is a calm thing rather than a frustrating one. We simply do not yet know the fractions, and so we do not yet know the number. The universe has not told us how common life is, or how common minds are, or how long civilizations endure. We hold a chain whose first links are solid and whose last links are missed, and we are honest enough to admit it. The not knowing is itself a kind of quiet to rest in. But notice what the chain does establish, even in its uncertainty. It shows that even a universe full of life could still be a universe of strangers. The pool can be large, the galaxy generous, the worlds many, and contact can still be vanishingly rare, because the same four separations stand between every pair, regardless of how many pairs there are. A crowded galaxy and a silent sky are not in conflict. The chain can be generous at every link, and the silence can remain exactly as we find it. And one link in that chain deserves a closer look, because it quietly governs all the rest. It is the last one, the question of how long a civilization lasts. That single unknown, more than any other, decides whether the galaxy's sparks ever overlap, and it ties directly back to the separation of time we walked through earlier. We turn to it next, gently, as the long chain of ifs settles into the calm admission that we are still, for now, simply listening and wondering. Of all the links in that long chain, the final one carries a strange and outsized weight. It is the question of how long a civilization endures once it has begun to send signals into space. We tend to treat it as just one factor among many, the last item on a list. But it turns out to be the quiet hinge on which the whole question of meeting swings, and it connects directly to the separation of time, the deepest of the four barriers we have walked through tonight. Here is why it matters so much. Suppose a galaxy produces civilizations fairly often, but each one lasts only a short while before it ends or transforms beyond recognition. Then at any given moment, only a very few are present, scattered thinly across the ages, almost never overlapping. The galaxy might give rise to thousands of civilizations over its long life, and still hold only one or two at a time, each alone in its own brief hour, the others all in the past or the future. Now suppose instead that civilizations, once begun, tend to last for ages, enduring for enormous stretches of time. Then many of them would be present at once, their windows overlapping, the night holding numerous sparks all burning together. In such a galaxy, neighbors would be far more likely to share a moment, and contact, while still difficult across the distances, would at least not be ruled out by timing. The same galaxy, producing civilizations at the same rate, would feel utterly different depending on this one number alone. So the number of our possible neighbors depends less on how easily life begins than on how long its brightest chapter lasts. A galaxy where life starts rarely but endures for ages might hold more simultaneous civilizations than a galaxy where life starts often but burns out quickly. The lifetime is the multiplier that quietly overwhelms the others. It can take a generous chain and empty the present moment, or take a modest chain and fill it. It is the setting that matters most, and the one we understand least. And of course, we have no firm idea what the typical lifetime is, because we have only our own example, and our own example is young. We have been a signaling civilization for only about a century, a single human lifetime, and we cannot yet see how long our chapter will run. We do not know whether civilizations usually last for mere centuries, or for many thousands of years, or longer still. The one figure that matters most is the one we have the least ability to measure. It is natural, standing here, to turn the question gently inward and wonder about our own span. How long will we last as a civilization that reaches outward? We need not answer it tonight, and we need not answer it with worry. It is enough to notice that our own lifetime is part of the same great unknown, that we are one of the sparks whose duration is still being written. Whatever our length, we are living inside it now, in the part that is lit, and that is its own quiet fact to rest in. There is something almost unifying in this. The barrier of time and the question of lifetime are really the same thing seen from two sides. The universe spreads its civilizations thin across the ages because each one lasts only a little while against the long night. If the sparks burned longer, the night would hold more of them at once. The whole difficulty of meeting, in the end, comes back to this gentle mismatch between how brief a civilization is and how immensely long the cosmos runs. So the chain that began with a staggering number of stars narrows, in the end, to a single soft uncertainty about endurance. And that uncertainty folds back into the separation of time. We do not know how many neighbors we have, because we do not know how long any of us last. And we cannot meet the ones who came before, or the ones who will come after, because the night is long and each spark is brief. The arithmetic and the silence are, at last, the same story told twice. With the chain explored and its final link understood, we are ready at last to ask the famous question directly, the one usually asked with a furrowed brow. If the galaxy has had so long and holds so much, where is everybody? We can finally meet that question with calm rather than unease, because we already understand what shapes the silence behind it. We turn to it now, gently, as the long chain of ifs settles back into the quiet from which we drew it. There is a famous version of this whole question, and it is usually told as a simple moment over lunch. The story goes that a thoughtful person, in the middle of an ordinary conversation about the cosmos, paused and asked, almost in passing, a question that has lingered ever since. If the universe is so old and so large, and if civilizations are at all common, then where is everybody? It is a plain question, asked in plain words, and it has never stopped being interesting. The force of it comes from a simple line of reasoning. The galaxy is immensely old, far older than our own kind, old enough that other civilizations could have arisen long before us, with immense head starts of millions of years. Given so much time, even slow expansion across the galaxy, world by world, and step by step, could in principle have reached every corner of it, many times over. By now, the reasoning goes, the galaxy could have been explored, settled, or at least made noticeable, again and again. And yet, when we look, we find quiet. What gives the puzzle its quiet force is the sheer size of the head start that others could have had. Our own kind is young, and the galaxy is old, old enough that a civilization could have arisen 1,000,000 years before us, or 100 million, and still be only a little way into the galaxy's long life. A head start of even 1,000,000 years is hard to hold in the mind, for it is longer than the whole of our recorded story many times repeated. With such an expanse of time available, it can seem as though someone, somewhere, ought to have spread far enough, or grown noticeable enough to be unmistakable by now. The expectation is a reasonable one, and that is exactly why the quiet is interesting, rather than dull. It is not that the silence is impossible to account for. It is that, at first glance, it seems to call for accounting at all. And that gentle sense of something needing explanation is what has kept so many curious minds turning the question over, slowly, across the years, never quite able to set it down. That is the puzzle in its simplest form. Our expectation, built on the galaxy's great age and size, is that signs of others should be common, perhaps even unavoidable. But our experience, when we actually look and listen, is of silence. No clear signal has arrived. No unmistakable sign of another civilization has been found. The gap between what we might expect and what we actually observe is wide, and that gap is the puzzle that has occupied so many curious minds ever since that quiet question over lunch. It is worth being honest about how genuine the puzzle is. It is not a trick or a confusion. On the face of it, a galaxy this old really does seem as though it ought to show some sign of others, and the silence really is, at first glance, surprising. Many thoughtful people have taken the quiet seriously, as a real fact that calls for a real explanation, rather than waving it away. That seriousness is part of what makes the question one of the most interesting open puzzles in all of science. But the way we meet a puzzle matters as much as the puzzle itself, and here the gentle path is also the truthful one. Some have met this silence with unease, imagining troubling reasons for it, dark explanations for why the sky says nothing. We will not take that path tonight, and not merely because this is a place for rest. We will not take it because, after walking through the 4 separations, we already hold a far calmer and more complete answer, one that needs nothing frightening at all. For the remarkable thing is that every barrier we have traced is, at the same time, a gentle answer to this very question. The silence is exactly what we should expect from a universe this large, this fixed in its speed, this old, and this steadily widening. We do not need to invent a reason for the quiet. We have already found 4 of them, and they were not designed to keep anyone away. They are simply the ordinary shape of the cosmos, and the silence falls out of that shape as naturally as evening falls out of the turning of a world. So we can take the old question and turn it from a source of unease into a source of understanding. Where is everybody? Perhaps right where we would expect them to be, scattered too far across space to reach, too slow to call across the gaps, spread too thin across time to share our moment, and in the wider cosmos, carried steadily beyond every horizon. The question that once seemed to demand a worrying answer turns out to have a quiet and almost ordinary one already in our hands. This reframing is the gift of having walked the long way around. Someone who asks where everybody is, without having sat with the 4 separations, may well feel a chill at the silence, as though the universe were withholding something, or hiding something, or warning us. but someone who understands the separations hears the same silence differently. They hear not a withholding, but a consequence. Not a threat, but a shape. The quiet stops being a question mark and becomes instead a simple and gentle fact about where and when we happen to live. And so, holding the famous question without fear, we can begin to listen to the silence itself more closely and ask what it really tells us. There is more to say about the gentle answers, and about one possibility in particular that is quietly hopeful. We turn to that next, slowly, letting the old question settle into its calm new shape. No longer a puzzle that unsettles, but a quiet we are learning, gently, how to read. Let us listen to the quiet a little more closely and hear how many gentle explanations it already contains. Once we hold the four separations in mind, the silence stops being a single baffling fact and becomes instead a sound with many possible sources, each of them ordinary, none of them frightening. The remarkable thing is that we do not have to choose among them tonight. Several may be true at once, and together they account for the quiet completely. Perhaps the sky is silent because civilizations are genuinely rare. The uncertain links in the long chain might be set very low, so that life begins seldom, and minds more seldom still, and signaling civilizations rarest of all. In that case, the galaxy holds only a scattered few, far apart, and the quiet is simply the sound of a sparsely settled cosmos. This is possible, and there is nothing alarming in it. A thinly populated galaxy would sound exactly as ours does. Or perhaps the sky is silent because civilizations are common but brief. They may arise often, flare for a little while, and fade or change before their neighbors ever appear, so that the galaxy has hosted many sparks and almost never two at once. This is the separation of time again, heard as an answer. The quiet would then be the sound of a galaxy full of civilizations spread thin across the ages, each one alone in its own hour, none overlapping with the others. Or perhaps the silence is simply a matter of distance. The others may be out there, even now, but set so far across the galaxy that their signals, faint to begin with and weakening as they travel, fade into the natural murmur of the cosmos long before they reach us. A signal does not travel forever with its full strength. It thins as it spreads, until only a near and attentive listener could catch it. The galaxy could be murmuring softly all over and still sound silent to us, simply because we are too far from every voice. Or perhaps the quiet means only that we have not listened long enough or in the right way. We have been paying real attention for only a few decades, with instruments that can catch only the nearest and loudest of signals, scanning a small part of the sky for a small part of the time. It is entirely possible that others are speaking in ways we have not yet learned to notice, on channels we have not thought to check, or simply too faintly for our young instruments to hear. The silence may be less about them and more about the narrowness of our own listening so far. Or perhaps many civilizations simply do not broadcast at all. There is no rule that says a thoughtful species must fill the sky with signals. A civilization might be quiet by nature, or quiet by choice, or quiet because it has moved on to ways of living that leave no loud trace across the light years. A galaxy could hold many such quiet peoples, each going gently about its existence, none of them shouting, and the sky above us would carry no word of any of them. Silence is, after all, the natural state, and noise the exception. What stands out is that not one of these explanations requires anything troubling. None of them asks us to imagine danger, or hostility, or some grim filter lying in wait. Each is simply a calm consequence of the kind of universe we have been describing all night, a universe that is large and fixed in its speed, and old and widening. The quiet has many gentle parents, and we need not adopt a frightening one. We may let the silence be ordinary, because ordinary is very likely exactly what it is. And there is a freeing thought hidden in having so many gentle answers at once. When a mystery has only a single possible explanation, that one explanation must carry all the weight, and we feel we must either accept it or solve the whole puzzle outright. But when a quiet has many ordinary causes, no single one of them has to be true for the quiet to make perfect sense. The silence might come from rarity, or from brevity, or from distance, or from the shortness of our own listening, or from voices pitched too low and too faint for us to catch, and most likely from several of these woven together. We are not standing before one locked door with one missing key. We are standing before a quiet that any number of ordinary things would each be enough to produce on its own. That is not a frustrating place to stand. It is a restful one, because it means the silence asks nothing strange of us and hides nothing alarming behind it, in order to be exactly what it already is. And we may hold several of these at once without strain. It may be that civilizations are somewhat rare and somewhat brief and rather far apart and not especially loud, and that our listening is still young, all at the same time. Each effect adds to the others, and together they more than account for the quiet. We are not forced to find the single true reason. We are free to rest in the knowledge that a silent sky is exactly what such a universe would produce, for many soft reasons working together. So the silence, listened to closely, turns out to be not one mystery, but a chorus of gentle possibilities, every one of them at peace with the cosmos as we understand it. There is no need to lie awake puzzling over it, and certainly no need to fear it. But there is one more way to hear the quiet, perhaps the most beautiful of all, and it turns the silence from something merely explained into something quietly hopeful. We turn to it next, softly, as the many gentle answers settle together into a single calm. There is a way of hearing the silence that is not about explaining it away at all, but about receiving it as something meaningful in itself. We tend to think of silence as mere absence, as nothing, as the simple lack of a sound we hope to hear. But silence can also be a kind of information. What the universe does not say can be almost as telling as what it does. And learning to read a quiet is its own gentle skill, one that asks for patience rather than worry. When we listen to the sky and hear nothing, we are not learning that the cosmos is empty. We are learning something subtler about how the loud, the near, and the present day are arranged, and how rare it is for all three to come together in our direction at our moment. The silence is a measurement, not a verdict. It marks the edges of what we could have heard so far, given how briefly and how narrowly we have listened. It tells us about the shape of our own small window, as much as about anyone on the far side of it. And there is one reading of the silence that is quietly hopeful, perhaps the gentlest of all. It may be that we are early. Someone, somewhere, has to be among the first generation of watchers in any galaxy, the first to build instruments and turn them upward and begin to wonder. There is no reason it could not be us. If the conditions for life and mind are still settling into place across the cosmos, then the great age of contact, if it ever comes, may lie ahead of us rather than behind. Hold that thought for a moment, because it changes the whole feeling of the quiet. If we are early, then the silence is not the silence of an empty hall after the gathering has ended and everyone has gone home. It is the silence of the early morning, before the others have woken, before the day's voices have begun. It is a quiet full of what has not happened yet, rather than empty of what is already over. The same silence, read this way, becomes a beginning rather than an ending. We cannot know for certain which silence we are hearing, the one that comes before or the one that comes after. But we are free to notice that both are possible and that nothing in the quiet forces the sadder reading upon us. A young cosmos, still warming to the possibility of life, would sound exactly as silent as an old one whose civilizations had all flickered out. Since we cannot yet tell the two apart, we are not being naive to hold the hopeful one gently in mind. We are only being honest about how little the silence truly settles. Whatever the reason, the silence is not proof of absence, and it is certainly not a threat. It is the natural sound of a universe shaped by four separations, a cosmos large enough to scatter its lights, fixed enough in its speed to keep them slow, old enough to spread them thin across time, and widening enough to carry the far ones away. A universe built like that would be quiet, even if it were full to overflowing with life. The quiet does not argue against the fullness. It sits comfortably beside it. This is the calm at the center of the whole question. The silence and the fullness are not enemies. They are two faces of the same enormous, patient thing. The cosmos can be alive in 1,000 places and silent in our ears at the same time, with no contradiction at all, because being alive somewhere and being audible here are entirely different conditions, and the four separations stand between them. We can believe the universe is full and still expect to hear nothing, and feel no tension in believing both. So we may let the silence be what it is, without straining to fill it or fearing what it might mean. It is not a held breath waiting to frighten us, nor a verdict handed down about our solitude. It is simply the sound a universe like ours makes, a quiet that may hold rarity, or brevity, or distance, or earliness, or all of them woven together. Listened to gently, it is not a lonely sound at all. It is the steady, even breathing of a cosmos far too large to be loud. And yet, knowing all of this, knowing how slim the odds are, and how long the silence may last, we have still chosen, again and again, to reach out into it. There is something quietly moving in that choice, something worth lingering on before the night draws to its close. We turn now to the small, hopeful gestures we have sent into the dark, and to what they say about us, as the silence settles into something we are no longer afraid to hear. In the face of all these barriers, there is something quietly moving about what we have done anyway. We have come to understand the distances, and the speed limit, and the depth of the ages, and the widening of space. We know how slim the chances are. And still, knowing all of it, we have chosen to reach outward, not because we expect a reply within our lifetimes, but because the reaching itself seems to matter to us. There is a gentleness in that choice that is worth honoring before the night ends. We have taken the small handful of spacecraft now drifting out beyond the planets, the ones that have finished their work among our neighboring worlds, and are coasting onward into the space between the stars, and we have given them something to carry. Fixed to them are simple messages, engraved and recorded, holding pictures and sounds of our world, a quiet greeting meant for whoever or whatever might one day come upon them. They are letters with no certain address, written to a stranger we will never meet, set adrift on the chance that they might someday be found. We have also, now and then, gathered our instruments and sent deliberate signals outward, brief and careful messages aimed toward distant gatherings of stars. These were sent in full knowledge that any reply, if one ever came, would take longer to return than any nation or language on our world is likely to endure. They were greetings cast toward a horizon so far that no one who sent them could ever hope to hear an answer. And yet they were sent, carefully composed, as though the sending were a kind of hope made visible. And we have built patient ears, instruments that listen, sweeping slowly across the sky for any signal that is not our own. Year after year, they gather the faint murmur of the cosmos and sift it for a pattern, for a sign that someone, somewhere, is calling. Most of what they hear is the natural sound of the universe, the hiss and crackle of stars and distant processes. But they keep listening, quietly, on the chance that one day something deliberate might arrive, some pattern that could only mean another mind. None of these gestures is likely to be answered soon, and we know it as we make them. The drifting probes will travel for an almost unthinkable span of time before they come anywhere near another star, and even then, only by the faintest chance of alignment. The signals we have sent will arrive, if they arrive at all, in a future so distant that everyone who composed them will be long forgotten, their world changed past recognition. We are not reaching out for ourselves. We are reaching out on behalf of a future we will never see. There is a tender image hidden in all of this, one that says something gentle about what we are. It is the image of a young civilization placing letters into bottles and setting them on a cosmic tide, knowing the tide will not carry any answer back within memory, and doing it anyway. We would rather call softly into the dark and wait than say nothing at all. The messages are slow, and the silence is long, and we keep reaching, because to reach is to refuse, gently, to believe that we are entirely alone. And perhaps that is the truest thing the whole question reveals about us. Not whether we will ever be answered, but that we choose to call. Faced with a universe that holds its civilizations apart across distance and speed and time and the widening dark, we do not fall silent in return. We make our small signals and our drifting letters and our patient listening offerings to a cosmos that may never notice, simply because reaching outward is part of what it means to be the kind of creature that looks up and wonders in the first place. So the barriers are real and the odds are long, and still we send our quiet greetings into the night. There is no foolishness in it, only a kind of grace, the grace of a brief and curious people refusing to be made smaller by the size of what surrounds them. And that brings us gently to the last turn of the night, the place where all of this finally settles into rest. For the same enormous distances that keep us apart hold, it turns out, a quiet and unexpected peace. And to that peace we now turn as our reaching settles softly back into stillness. Having walked through all 4 separations and listened to the silence and honored the small ways we reach into it, we come at last to where the whole night has been leading. Not to disappointment and not to loneliness, but to a kind of rest. The universe has made meeting nearly impossible, yes. But the surprising and gentle truth, the one worth carrying with you towards sleep, is that the very same features which keep civilizations apart are the features that allowed any of us to exist at all. Consider what each barrier truly is, seen in a kinder light. The speed limit that isolates us, that keeps our greetings slow and our neighbors out of reach, is also the rule that keeps cause firmly before effect. It is what keeps the universe orderly and sensible from one moment to the next. What allows there to be a steady world in which anything at all can happen in a reliable order. Without that limit, there would be no dependable cosmos to live in. The same rule that holds us apart is the rule that holds everything together. Consider the enormous distances, the wide emptiness between the stars that no signal can easily cross. That same spaciousness is what gives each star the space and the quiet to form its worlds, to gather its planets and hold them in steady orbits, sheltered from the constant disturbance of crowded neighbors. A cosmos packed tightly enough for easy meeting would be a cosmos too turbulent for stable worlds to last. The space that separates us is the same space that let a quiet planet circle a steady sun long enough for life to begin. Consider the long age of the universe, the depth of time that scatters civilizations across eons and keeps our sparks from overlapping. That same long patience is what allowed life to arise at all. Life did not appear quickly. It unfolded slowly, across immense stretches of time, world building upon world, chemistry deepening into biology, across spans that dwarf all of history. The very depth of time that separates us from our neighbors is the depth of time that was needed to make us in the first place. We are children of the long ages that keep us apart. And consider the expansion, the widening of space that carries the far galaxies beyond every horizon. That same unfolding is bound up with the beginning that set the whole universe in motion, the great expansion out of which all the structure we know emerged. The growth that isolates the distant cosmos is part of the same process that gave the universe its size, its history, the space it needed to cool and form and grow complex. The widening dark is not a flaw laid over a friendly cosmos. It is part of the very unfolding that made a cosmos able to hold minds. So the four separations are not cruelties imposed upon an otherwise welcoming universe. They are the conditions of a universe that could produce thinking creatures at all. A cosmos friendly enough for easy meeting, small and slow and young and still, would almost certainly have been a cosmos too simple ever to make us. We cannot have the easy company without giving up the very things that brought us into being. The distance and the solitude are the price, and also the proof of a universe complex enough to wake up and wonder about itself. Seen this way, the silence softens completely. We are not shut out of some gathering to which everyone else was invited. We are early and small and far away, in a universe wide enough and old enough to have made us, scattered among lights too distant and too brief to gather with our own. That is not abandonment. It is simply the scale of the thing we belong to. To be a brief, thinking spark in a cosmos this large is not a small or sorry fate. It may be one of the rarest and most precious things that can happen anywhere at all, and there is comfort in the distance itself if we let ourselves feel it. A universe where everyone could easily reach everyone would be a smaller and louder place, crowded and restless, with no quiet left in it. The stillness we live in is the stillness of enormous space and enormous time, and it is space enough for every spark to burn gently in its own place, without needing to be seen by another to matter. The far things rest far away. They are not lost. They are simply keeping their distance, as the cosmos asks them to. So let the silence overhead be what it truly is. Not an empty sky, but an immense and patient one, holding its scattered lights far apart across more space and more time than the mind can ever gather in. No one has shut us out. No one is missing who was meant to be here. We have simply arrived in our own hour, in our own small and well-placed corner, early enough to see the whole great sky while its lights are still shining. There is a quiet sufficiency in that, a feeling of being exactly where and when we are, with nothing else required. There is nowhere you need to reach tonight, and no one you need to answer. The distances will keep themselves. The far stars will hold their silence without any help from you, as they always have, turning slowly in a dark that is not lonely, only large. Let the question rest now, fully answered and gently set down. Let your thoughts grow slow and quiet, like the space between the stars. Let your breathing soften. Let the far lights keep their distance, and let yourself be exactly here. Sleep well, and good night.